Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ajal, a man of the people. We're looking forward to hear about your topic today. Over to you, sir.
Wow. I don't know what I've missed because I've been having a bit of a technical glitch, but my assumption is that I'll go straight to the subject that I'm discussing. Now, this afternoon, or whatever time it is in your part of the world, whether it's morning or evening, a very, very good one to you. I'm coming in to you to discuss the subject of mental health. This has been the mental health month. The month of May has been the mental health month, and we are still running until the 31st. We've had a number of activities surrounding or related to mental health and wellness. A lot of the time, we've made it our preserve to look out for our physical health. We go to the doctor, we do annual medicals, we do checkup, we run, we do exercise, we play basketball, we swim. We do all of these physical things. We watch our diet. Some of us go on a keto diet just to be sure that when we eat, what we eat is not adding us more calories or carbohydrates in order to gain more fat. So we keep lean, we keep trim, we watch for we stand on the scales, on the weighing scales, and check for our weight. But how often do we stop to ask ourselves if our mind is also as healthy as our body is? This is the subject I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. Well, I say afternoon because from this part of East Africa, it's afternoon. Friends, fellow Toastmasters and guests, do you know what mental hygiene means? What is mental hygiene? Well, we know about hand hygiene, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19. We had to develop the habit of washing our hands or sanitizing. You cannot access any public facilities without having to have your hands sanitized or your temperature checked. That's physical hygiene. But how often do we stop to ask ourselves, is our mental state of health also just as good as our physical state of health? Why do I ask this question? Well, it's because mental health is becoming a silent pandemic. The New Vision, Uganda's leading daily, exactly 2 weeks ago, led with a headline saying 14 million Ugandans are mentally sick. Now, those are the ones that have sought some form of support. And of the 14 million Ugandans who are deemed to be mentally sick, at least 15% of those are receiving medication. In other words, they have checked into a facility, they are being treated, they are being supported to recover. They're on some kind of rehabilitation or treatment or therapy, counseling, or psychiatric treatment and evaluation. So that's a confirmed number. What's the percentage? For a population of between 43, the estimates are between 42 to 45 million Ugandans, that's about 30% or up to 32%. So that's just Uganda. What about the World Health Organization? The World Health Organization deems that about 30% of the world's population is equally mentally unstable or sick from time to time. 30% are the ones that have been tested, that have been checked, that have been evaluated, that have been diagnosed to have one form of mental illness or other. Now, what is mental health in the first place? Before we dive into the nitty-gritty and the details of mental health, what is this big elephant in the room we're addressing today at this conference? Making boss moves. Mental health is basically the state of mind and wellness. It's your ability to access all your broad range of cognitive abilities without necessarily having to have either extremes of, extreme emotions, highs or lows. It's that state of stability. It's your ability to react to triggers. It's your ability to react to the different things in your environment, in your society, that allows you to stay cognizant of your environment, that allows you to stay stable mentally. In much the same way as you might look physically healthy, if the emotions in your mind, if the chemicals in your brain, if the glands in your body are releasing way more chemicals or hormones into your bloodstream than necessary, than normal, you might start to suffer from some kind of imbalances. And that might express itself through your emotions, through your speech, and through your actions. Therefore, fellow Toastmasters and guests, it is imperative that in much the same way as we go for a physical every year, for most people, they do that. It's also important that we go for a mental health check from time to time. Now, how do you know that you're in a state of health that is not so good, mentally speaking? How do you tell? As a human resources practitioner in my first profession, and as a coach in my second profession, I practice both of these professions concurrently. In human resources management, what we do is we call that workplace assistance programs, employee workplace assistance programs. Now, what are these workplace assistance programs? These are prepositions by human resources departments to ensure that the staff are stable, not just physically, but mentally. In much the same way as we have medical insurance for the malarias and the cancers and all these other physical ailments, we should also extend the same services for mental health. So that if a person presents with stress, with work burnout, with depression, with post-traumatic stress disorder, with obsessive compulsive disorders, with multiple personality disorders, with a split personality disorder, with sleeplessness or insomnia. We call that insomnia, or in some instances, we call it sleep apnea. If a person has zero or little control over their temper and their emotions, friends, these are all red flags and telltale signs that this person might be suffering from some form of mental illness. Further afield, we all get the Monday blues, don't we? Most of us, if it's Monday 9 a.m., we're not excited to go to work. Why? We go to a job we hate. We face a boss we don't like. We have to sit next to co-workers we can't stand. We are dealing with difficult clients or customers who rant and rave. And when a customer is smashing and banging tables, you have no choice but to serve them regardless. After all, customer is king, isn't it? But is that always the case? Not necessarily. That customer who is being given so much leeway to rant and rave and bang tables is affecting the cognitive ability of those customer service agents and representatives to serve him or her, and also to stay healthy mentally. Because every time you are shouted at, you're screamed at, you're verbally or physically abused and attacked, a part of you goes into a sad state, and you start to produce increasing amounts of chemicals in your body, either to fight or to flee or to duck. Those 3 F's, fright, F, number 1, you get scared. Number 2, fight back is the second F. And if you can't flee, take to flight, the third F. All these 3 are driven by the chemicals in your brain that are being produced by the glands in your brain. There is something we call the amygdala in your brain, the amygdala cortex. This amygdala is responsible for those 3 F's. The adrenaline is produced, the adrenaline gland goes into overdrive, produces adrenaline into your bloodstream, and then you get angry, you get excited, you start to sweat profusely, you want to flee or fight or duck. And if it's in too much production, because your boss is constantly screaming and shouting at you, it's not surprising that people have attacked their bosses. They have broken out into blows at the office. Well, it's because of those extra chemicals that are being produced in your brain at that point in time in your bloodstream that make you go out of control. We call that an amygdala hijack. You've been hijacked. Somebody says, I don't even know what happened to me that day. I jumped on tables. So those are all telltale signs. If you're a leader, I will not say boss, even though the conference says make boss moves. If you're a leader, the quality of your leadership and how you approach your staff, are you approachable yourself? will to a great extent determine. I can tell you for a fact, and you can take this to the bank, hundreds of thousands of employees are suffering an ill state of mental health because of a tyrannical boss, a narcissistic boss. And regardless of whether this boss is male or female, we have narcissists who are both female and male. Trust me on that one. So it is very, very, very highly likely that you, the employer, are creating a disabling environment for mental health. You're taking away the mental wellness of your staff because of your tyrannical, narcissistic behavior. Always ask yourself this question: how would I feel if I was the one in the spotlight? If I was the one being asked to do this assignment at such a short notice, with such a short deadline, with hardly any resources, tools of trade lacking, logistics completely amiss, how would I feel? Would I be expected to deliver the job? And if the answer is no, for goodness sake, trace yourself back, trace your steps back and say, I need to be a bit more empathetic to my employees and the staff under my care. Because you might inadvertently be creating a set of sick, mentally deranged people. So let me just give you a bit of a range of things to look out for as telltale signs of red flags of ill mental health. The first one is stress. Now we think stress is just stress. No. Everybody on planet Earth receives stress. There's a saying, and it's not really accurate English. It's some kind of slang used in Uganda here. Adulting is hard. What does that mean? Well, as children, we are told we can't wait to become adults. Now we're adults, and we realize, wait a minute, it's tough being an adult. Bills must be paid on time. School fees must be sorted out. The car must be serviced. The house must be paid for, whether it's a rented house or on mortgage, on a loan from a bank. All of these things are tough. Medical bills must be met and on time. They must be paid. Elderly parents must be supported and treated. It is impossible to stay 100% stress-free. It's impossible. However, the difference between a mentally healthy person and a mentally unstable or sick person is their inability to deal with stress. Every single one of us, the 8 billion humans on planet Earth, get stressed out. They are what we call stressors. And I'm just giving you a few examples: the bills, the food, the rent, the mortgage, the construction costs, cement, the cost of cement has gone up, the cost of steel has gone up. Fuel in Kampala, the cost of petrol and diesel has almost doubled in the last 3 months. This is insane. The cost of gas for cooking. I just bought a big cylinder, 12 kilogram cylinder of gas this afternoon. The cost has gone up by an extra $10 in just 2 months. So, ladies and gentlemen and friends, these are stressors. When you find yourself increasingly getting stressed without any solution, seek help, seek therapy, seek counseling, seek the support of friends and family, colleagues. Go to HR and say, listen, I think I need to speak to somebody. I need to speak to a counselor, a therapist. And they'll preserve and protect your dignity and allow you to go and see this counselor or therapist in private, or this psychologist in private. The second one is work burnout. Consistent stress left unresolved will definitely lead you to burning out. There's no physical condition called work burnout. It's a mental state of mind. It's a state of mind, brother. It's a mental state of being that you're feeling burnt out, not because you lack blood or glucose or whatever that might be the case, but by and large, it's a mental state. You feel completely exhausted. You go to the doctor, they check for all your physical vitals and everything turns out just fine. It is fine. The doctor tests for everything, a battery of tests, complete blood count, malaria, typhoid, saliva swab. They even check for things like, all manner of things, even HIV. They check for blood sugar levels and everything turns out just fine. But you have no energy. You burnt out. You don't sleep at night. You work too long. You work terrific long hours. That's work burnout. It's a form of mental health, a form of mental illness, actually. And those are just the minor stages. Those are just the minor stages. Noreen Ngami says, it's okay not to be okay. Yes, it's okay not to be okay. If you feel stressed out, take leave. Take a break. Even if you want to go on holiday by yourself, it's acceptable if it's for the sake of your mental stability. You can actually take a one-man or one-woman holiday. It's acceptable. So speak to your line manager, speak to your boss if you feel like it's unfair. 3 people have resigned from your department. They have never been replaced, but they have loaded you with all their work and they have not even increased your acting allowance or salary. No bonuses, nothing. You're just expected to be Superman or Superwoman. You will break down and crash real badly, right? So those are the milder forms. Now let's go further afield. You're not starting to have serious complications of mental illness. Lack of sleep. Did you realize or did you know that all forms of mental illness present with poor sleeping patterns? Sleep apnea, sleeplessness, insomnia. Did you know that? These are all representations of poor mental health. When you find yourself unable to sleep, you sleep very lightly. Any slight bark of a dog or an alarm of a car or a neighbor driving through your neighborhood at night at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, you don't sleep. You wake up and you stay up all night. The other one is paranoia. You're suspicious of everybody. You have this sense of suspicion. You have a sense of victimhood. You have a sense of, you have distorted thought patterns. Distorted thought patterns. What are some of these distorted thought patterns? One of them is distorted thought patterns of grandeur. You go to a mental health facility and you find a person saying, I am the president of Uganda. Tell them, but the president of Uganda is President Museveni. No, I am the president of Uganda. Now that person has grandeur. They have delusions of grandeur. They tell you, I'm the Queen of England. I was speaking to a friend who came to visit me and my family yesterday. His mother suffers from bipolar disorder. When she breaks down at sometimes, she suffers from delusions of grandeur. And she says, I am the Queen of England. Where is my motorcade? They have to pick me from here and take me to Serena Kampala Hotel. Those delusions might even express themselves in your family, amongst your spouses, your children, your parents. All of these things indicate to you that this is a state of unhealthy mind, an unhealthy mind, okay? So the opposite of these kinds of delusions are delusions of victimhood or persecutory delusions. I lived with a spouse for 17 years who had persecutory delusions. She had schizophrenia. This is how I know so much about mental health, even though I'm a human resources practitioner and a coach, who for the most part, or for all of my practice, I use positive psychology. And I must also tell you, these delusions of persecution, the person is paranoid. They lock their door twice. They press the alarm on the car, but they still open the door of the car to check, have I really locked this car? They burglar-proof all their house windows and doors. They raise the burglar proofing. They raise the barbed wire fencing of their home. They hire a guard with guns. They get the police, maybe 2, 3, 4 special forces command soldiers are guarding them at their homes. And then they have all these commandos. They have these guards, both physical bodyguards and also the ones with guns that protect their perimeter wall fencing. And then they go ahead and put their children in some kind of rigorous security checks. Extreme paranoia is a form of mental illness. Delusions, we call this delusionary mindset. Victimhood delusions or grandiose delusions. Now, these are classic symptoms of schizophrenia. Any of you who has watched the movie A Beautiful Mind will know what I'm talking about. It was about a doctor who was schizophrenic. In real life, he was smart to the extent of winning a Nobel Prize in science, mathematics, and physics. But in reality, he was also schizophrenic. He imagined himself as a CIA agent, defending the US against the KGB of Russia back in the days of the Cold War. Now, that is what we talk about as schizophrenia. It's yet another form of mental illness. What is the other one? Bipolar disorder. This is very common, also known as manic depression. Manic depression is when you You oscillate between two emotions. You can hardly be consistent in your emotions. You're very, very, very manic. In other words, you work crazy hours, like 20 hours a day. And you thump yourself on the chest and say, I'm a workaholic. You're proud of being a workaholic. You might actually be mentally sick. That's how you're able to put in so many hours of work without getting exhausted. But guess what? True to form, just like the sun follows the moon, after a quarter, 3 to 4 months later on, you'll be down. You'll go through a depressed state of mind. You'll be completely devoid of energy. You'll lose desire and interest in things that would normally make you excited. You find yourself sleeping 20 hours a day. Where you used to work 20 hours a day, now you sleep 20 hours a day. You find yourself disinterested in normal things like bathing, eating, drinking. You starve yourself. You become skinny. You don't want to bathe. You don't want to eat. You don't want to associate with people. You lock yourself up in your room. You lock yourself in your room. You never get out of your room. And I did a Twitter space last Saturday with Andrew Chamagero, who is an NTV reporter here in Kampala. He's actually a newscaster for the 9 o'clock news. He's called Andrew Chamagero, Omuntu Awansi. That is his nickname, Omuntu Awansi, meaning, a person of the earth. So this gentleman and I were on a Twitter space. It was supposed to last 2 hours on a Saturday morning from 7 to 9. It lasted 5.5. We finished at 12:30. And the reason we stopped is because I had to go for therapy myself. And my therapist had arrived. So I had to cut short the show. Otherwise, we're still going on until maybe 1 or 2. Because we had callers from 28 countries on all 6 continents, Ugandans and other nationals from all over the world, because they were just listening to Twitter. They just went and followed me or Andrew or his co-host, Engineer Faisal, and tuned in. We've so far had over 12,000 listeners in 1 week to that very same Twitter space. The numbers on the show that day were over 3,000. So after the end of the show, we've now had an additional 8,000 who have listened in and continue. And the message has just kept on going on and on, because I was talking about mental illnesses and mental health. So this is bipolar. Bipolar disorder is when a person has extreme moods. They are not consistent. These are mood affective disorders. Mental illnesses are mood affective disorders. Schizophrenia is a mood affective disorder. Bipolar disorder is a mood affective disorder. How about this? Obsessive compulsive disorder. How many of us brag that, I have a bit of OCD, You're bragging about a mental illness? Really? OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. People who wash their hands all the time with hot water until their hands burn. Obsessive compulsive disorder. People who sanitize all the time until they kill even the useful bacteria on their hands. They wash all the time. They dress so clean. If you look into their spaces, even if you move the book out of the library, they will notice. Obsession. And in much the same way, people who are obsessive are also obsessive with their relationships. Therefore, ladies, pay attention to this. If you find yourself extremely possessive of your partner, your husband, boyfriend, or spouse, obsessive to a degree that you injure them or injure yourself, you're bordering on a mental illness. A bit of possessiveness is healthy and normal because, you married this person. For lack of a better word, you own them. Okay, I don't want to say that, but you paid bride price. This is Africa. You don't own them really, but they are your spouse, right? They are your husband, or they are your wife. They are the mother of your children or the father of your children. You live in the same home, same house, same bed, same room. So a level of, this is my person. You don't want to have them being shared by every woman out there or every man out there. Are we together? So that's healthy. And that's what marriage is all about. It's a commitment to that spouse that you've married, that you've said vows to till death do you part. However, if this person is obsessively jealous to the point of injuring you for no apparent reason, stopping you from working, men do this a lot. They stop their wives from working, tell their wives, go and be a full-time housewife. This is obsession. This is bordering on unhealthy. So ladies and gentlemen, look out for these telltale signs. Poor anger management or lack of anger management, complete lack of anger management. Any slight thing triggers you off and you smash plates, cups, glasses. You throw knives. Why am I using these same examples? My own wife smashed plates on walls regularly until every last plate was finished in the kitchen. She threw knives at me. She smashed and broke my arm in 3 different parts at one point. she was suffering from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. These two diseases are probably the hardest mental illnesses there are on planet Earth, probably the hardest to detect and to treat. Now, I know a lot of people who have put in the chat and said, how do I tell? Because I see some of these signs in myself. Well, go to the hospital, seek therapy, seek counseling, and avoid stigma. Stigma starts with yourself. You self-stigmatize. My wife rejected the fact that she was mentally sick. And I use the word was because she's passed. She committed suicide and died just exactly 2 months ago, as of yesterday, 28th of March. So this is a serious matter. We cannot take this thing lightly. It's a very serious matter. For 17 years, we lived under the same roof, but she rejected every attempt of mine to seek her therapy and seek and treatment. Now, if you're not sick, thank God. Not all of us are sick. I think I'm okay because I was able to stay firm and strong. And I surrounded myself with a support system. I surrounded myself with fellow coaches who talked positive psychology, fellow HR practitioners who are always out there supporting other people. I did psychosocial assessments on myself. I've tested and I'm fine. I can tell you that for a fact because I've been to the doctor's office several times just to be sure I'm not dealing with something mental. And I found out I was fine, actually. I'm stable. My chemicals and my hormones are well balanced. But if you don't know for sure, if you have these symptoms and signs, could be your spouse, could be your teenage son or daughter, could be your mother or father, for goodness sake, take them to the doctor's office. Not just any doctor, to a psychiatrist. Take them to the psychiatrist and let them be tested and let them be treated. There are medications that can reverse mental ill health. How will they be tested? They'll test their hormonal imbalances. They'll find they have so many more hormones than normal. Estrogen, testosterone, pituitary gland through the saliva, through the blood. You can test for, adrenaline. You can test for all manner, oxytocin. You can test for all manner of hormones. Dopamine. Dopamine is that hormone that makes you get the feeling of a high when you take a bit of alcohol. For people who abuse drugs, that high is dopamine. So the opposite of dopamine is what lowers you down. That is serotonin. Serotonin calms you down. So addictive substances, use of drugs and alcohol leading to addictions. These are a precursor to a poor state of mental health. Seek professional help when necessary. And ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters and guests, I want to thank you so much. Let's follow these two hashtags on social media. On Facebook, there's the 25 push-ups in 25 days challenge to raise awareness for mental health. I did that last year in support of my wife, even though publicly I never came out to say why I was doing it. The second one is stop the stigma. Hashtag stop the stigma. There's no space when you're spelling out a hashtag. It's stop the stigma. No space in between with the hashtag at the start. And number 3, raise mental health awareness. Because for just 6% of our country's GDP, which is allotted to health, of that only 1% is allotted to mental health. No wonder the executive director of the National Referral Mental Hospital in Uganda in Butarika said mental health is the stepchild of health in this country. Hopefully it's not the stepchild of health in Kenya, Tanzania, or any other country for that matter. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring my conversation to a stop here. I know it can take a whole day if we didn't have time constraints, but in the interest of time, thank you so much for giving me this time and for being an amazing audience. Over to you, TMOD, or conference chair for that matter.
Stop the stigma. Stop the stigma, Mr. Ajal. Amazing. Thank you so much. That was a magnificent speech and amazing lessons. You know what? That actually resonates with some of my experiences I've gone through. More to say, the red flags to mental health got me thinking depression, split personality, insomnia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I suffer from one of these. But here's the thing. The thing is, and you should ask yourself this, every time you are shouted at, abused, frightened, you're subjected to mental health. Have we asked ourselves how many times we subject people who are close to us to these dangers? I will leave that to you to ponder with what our speaker has just stated. But I would like now to focus our attention to the chat room. Oh my, there are so many comments, endless questions, Mr. Ajal. I hope you are ready for them. Allow me to read a few comments from the chat room. One of them is, thank you for bringing this topic to the fore, Mr. Ajal. We must continue having this conversation. And I love this chart by Noreen Gummy. It is okay not to be okay. It is okay to say no. It is okay to reach out to our loved ones. It is okay to love yourself. Love yourself, love your health. Thank you so much, Noreen. Another comment is, I have been a victim countless times. Such work-related stress has sent me to hospital numerous times. We have a question here, Mr. Ajal. Joseph mentioned mental hygiene, but did not develop it. I am waiting for him to build on it, but if he doesn't, then could he please build on it? Over to you, Mr. Ajal.
Thank you very much, our host. Mental hygiene is basically the things that you need to do to stay healthy mentally. For example, going to sleep at the same time and waking up at the same time every day, regardless of whether it's a public holiday, a weekend, or you're on vacation. You can sleep in later, but your natural body clock will wake you up at probably 4:30, 4 or 5 or 6 a.m., depending on whatever time of the day you wake up to start your work. So that way, you don't disorganize your sleep patterns. Secondly, go to sleep in a quiet, cool, dark room. Why quiet, cool, and dark? If it's too hot, your body temperature needs to lower below 37 degrees at about 36.5 for you to sleep very soundly, because you'll perspire. All your body organs are working overtime to cleanse the toxins out of your system. This is why you wake up with a sweat. You find your bed sheets are sweat, covered in sweat. Not because you're working overnight, no, it's because your body is releasing the toxin through your skin, and therefore you need to have drunk some water before you go to bed at night. That way your body can flush out the toxins. And usually also when you wake up, the first thing you do is you go to the bathroom, again, to flush out the toxins. So sleep at the same time every night in a cool, dark, and quiet room. When there's music or a television or radio on, your brain stays working. You're not really asleep. Your eyes are shut, but your brain is working. And therefore, when your brain is working at over the capacity that it should be working at when you're asleep, it should be at a fairly quieter pace when you're asleep. It allows your whole body to rest and your brain to rest. The biggest hindrance to good mental health is lack of sleep, actually. It's not even substances. It's purely lack of sleep, because you burn up your neurons, you burn up your brain cells, your brain shrinks, your brain gets injured from the lack of sleep. So insomnia is a big, big, big red flag. And of course, for mental hygiene, it also means a dark room. Dark meaning that you have no lights on, again, for the same reason. When you have lights on, the light receptors in your eyes are still working even though you're asleep. So your brain is not fully shut down, and that way you don't get the decent rest. We call that REM sleep or REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, when your body shuts down fully and you sleep soundly and recoverably. Then lastly but not least, avoid putting into your mind graphic images that will stay in your brain for long. These cause trauma, and therefore trauma, you've heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-COVID stress disorder. The things you allow your mind to see through movies, through graphic images, through blood and so on, very graphic images on social media and so on. These things affect your moods, affect your mental state of health. And lastly, your feeding habits. There are foods that mess up your brain, and there are foods that keep your brain healthy and grow your brain cells. Actually, lots of nuts are very good for the brain cells, lots of green leafy vegetables and stuff of that kind. Very, very good for your brain health. So this is a whole other topic of its own, but let's leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajal. I know there are numerous questions. I would kindly ask you to leave your contacts on the chat, because there are so many questions. We have an internal request. Allow us to proceed to the next session. Kindly, Mr. Ajal, leave your contacts on the chat, and I'm sure most of us will get to you, because the questions that are here cannot go unattended. Thank you very much.